remember everything I've told you, and I'll just power through them again. This was sorry I had to do it this way, but this is you understand what's going on. Okay, so really nice picture of Heath looking like a real hipster. Coburg in 1912. Heath as a young man. One of the designs that I'm fairly certain Heath worked for when he was apprenticed to George Jobbins. This is Heath's RAIA, or RVIA, sorry, membership. Geraldton, when Heath was there, or near enough. The Geraldton municipal offices, which Heath probably designed. As I say, it's hard to get actual information on that, but it's just the place that was so comfortable councillors didn't want to leave. Geraldton Showgrounds, which Heath ostensibly designed. Not quite sure how you design a showgrounds, but that's my ignorance because I know he did quite a few. This is the street that he and his family lived in 1904. So the house there, I doubt the rainbow flag was out the front, but who knows. And this, as I say, is very close to the Melbourne General. This is his design for the cemetery, which you're familiar with. Here on the right, you see the house that he designed and lived in with his family for, what would it be, 16 years. His Muslim chapel, there it is more recently. His Jewish chapel, once again, recently. Some of the lead light that I'm guessing is original. The entranceway to Faulkner Cemetery, so he certainly liked I'm going to say flamboyant, elaborate entranceway. This is his federal capital competition entry, not actually a wonderful reproduction of it, but better than the one that's actually in the Reps book, Canberra 1912. This is one of the rare examples of a Canberra competition entry plan that exists, because most of the plans in the Reps book are taken from photographs that were made in or around 1912 of the competition contenders, and however the Heath one is in his collected papers, the Josephine Johnson collection at the State Library. So I've only gone in, it's too big to photograph, but it's beautifully coloured, it's a beautifully detailed and coloured. So I've only been able to get little bits and pieces that I liked off it, like for instance his, in the lake, he made a lake for Canberra, like the lake that the Griffins designed for Canberra, the refuge for lake fowl islands. This is his spectacular Sydney Road beautification scheme. It's once again it's kind of it's a bad reproduction from I think the Herald. So it's not real easy to see what's there, but it does have all the bells and whistles I think for the time, and of course that intersection has now been turned into a really scary tram and road situation that you sort of take your life in your hands when you run across there. That's my attempt to just blow up a little section of that that's reproduced at that size. It's barely legible, but I was just trying to look in things that Heath did, look in his work to see, particularly thinking about the diamond in Coburg Town Hall, and trying to figure out whether he ever used a device like that before or since. The answer seems to tend to be no. But these buildings, which aren't described in the text that accompany this plan, this totally spec plan for beautifying Sydney Road, there's no explanation for what they're meant to be. They look like little palaces or something. They do have, if not domes, they do have that kind of that feel to them there at the end. As I say, he was a designer of showgrounds. He won £300, that's not bad. in 1914, and of course he was just doing this stuff while he was getting paid his regular wage as well. He won a competition in Essendon for designing a grandstand. He ended up suing Essendon Council because they didn't pay him. But this all leads up to his possibly most famous enterprise. And this is, of course, the reason why he came, to find out about the Coburg Town Hall. So, Coburg Town Hall was officially opened on the last day of October 1923 when Mayor Brown opened its front door with a large gold key, and attendees experienced what the age, with typical restraint, described as an enjoyable concert. No more information there. So what was the context for this building, which no doubt raised eyebrows as a structure, which also signalled to the rest of Melbourne that Coburg was a place to be reckoned with? This was a period in which critics were quick to challenge council spending on town hall white elephants. Geelong West Council, for instance, proposed a new town hall in 1919, was defeated by a ratepayers referendum on the grounds of cost. Possibly when the Geelong West councillors were promoting that idea of a new town hall for Geelong West, they were inspired by the example of the new town of Chilwell Town Hall, which was opened in late 1916. The town halls weren't designed to be money sinks generally. Port Melbourne seems to be the best comparison with Coburg at this time. Very different, I think, makeup in terms of the citizenry, but it has quite a few commonalities. So Port Melbourne was really adding to its hall accommodation in 1915, which led to extensive discussions about its capacity to run what were essentially commercial operations in the new building. Particularly, they were open to show moving pictures in their hall. And the idea was often that councils were particularly keen to open moving picture theatres in their halls, or to go into a arrangement with a commercial exhibitor of moving pictures on the basis that this was the way that they were going to pay off their town hall as quickly as possible, and that they owed it to their ratepayers to pay off their town hall as quickly as possible. This is the 1915 addition to the Port Melbourne municipal buildings. It's now the library. It's in Spring Street, Port Melbourne. But there were all kinds of issues that came with things like, inviting everybody to pay to come into your town hall to watch moving pictures. So there were news reports of squabbles and fights, and revelry in the aisles at Port Melbourne Pictures, for instance. Koran might be seen to have been a bit smarter. They weren't so much into moving pictures. The new Koran Town Hall was opened in 1916 as well, and they tended to concentrate on dances. Only the most refined young ladies and gentlemen were asked to attend the dances at Koran. They must wear gloves. Was something that was announced in the newspapers in the pretty much First World War. I think that what councils generally, and it's hard to know why local government areas were so keen on town halls, particularly at this time. But I think that what councils at the turn of the century feared the most was the fate of a city like Kew, whose town hall was not even planned to be a town hall, being privately erected as a mechanics institute building in 1860, purchased by the hastily assembled Kew Council when it broke away from the Wurundjeri Roads Board in 1865. And there was a particular desperation for many Kewites, not least the proprietor of its very vocal local newspaper, who hated this lack of civic focus in his suburb. Many Kew citizens often used Hawthorne's 1888 town hall for social and civic functions, which must have been a little bit humiliating, I think, in In fact, it's even referred to as such by people from Kew at that time. And they would also perhaps use the city's recreation hall. Another second-hand building, built in 1880 and acquired by Kew in 1917 from a firm which has operated it as a private leisure centre. The prime objection to these two buildings amongst Kew people seem to have been not so much their utilitarian nature, but their age, appearance and provenance, and what these issues in varying degree told the outside world of Kew's civic pride. Kew and Coburg had another problem in common. Kew was dogged by the spectre of its insane asylum, just as Coburg was by its prison. Notwithstanding the remaining argument, both facilities demonstrated a civilised and progressive society rather than a degraded local environment. But Coburg had, as everyone knows, gone so far as to change its name to avoid association with a notorious institution. So Blythe says of Charles Heath's Coburg Town Hall, he has taken the traditional dome and colonnade of civic buildings, but uses them in a novel way. Heath gives them an intimate human scale and creates a friendly, approachable building rather than an awesome one. Of course, there are other valuable aspects to the design and location of the town hall. For instance, it covers up a prison. It's also long and low. There's no tower by which you could look into the prison yards or accidentally see them, anything like that. Its dome is its most recognisable and probably iconic feature. It appears on page 37 of the Timothy Hubbard's Coburg Heritage Report, where it's described as Lutyens-esque, and it's given a B grade by the Hubbard Report on the basis that it is of value in Coburg's municipal history and Melbourne's municipal histories. When Hubbard says Lutyens-esque, I'm going to guess he's talking about what Heath, assuming he knew about this, would have known as the Viceroy's House in New Delhi, which is now called the Rashtrapati Bhavan in New Delhi. But sadly, we don't know what Heath was thinking. There's no evidence of any kind of discussion about the dome, and it's quite possible he was just given his free range to come up with whatever he wanted to. The drawings for the town hall are held in the Blythe and Joseph collection at the State Library. Once again, they're really difficult to photograph, and you can really only look at bits of them, but all the attention to detail is pretty extraordinary, and there is a huge amount of work that went into this production. Presumably quite a lot of money as well was being spent on this place. So Heath was designing and building, supervising the build of Coburg Town Hall, presumably in the late 1910s into the early 1920s. I believe it was functioning 100 years ago today. It wasn't technically opened until late 1923. He was associated with it for the subsequent deck for that 1920s and into the 1930s. And he was involved in reconfiguring the hall as a cinema. And also, I think, throughout that time, he was constantly responding to problems, like all new buildings have problems. Heath's Coburg Town Hall had its fair share. Some of them seem to be associated either with changes in requirements from the health department or whatever about safety in the hall, ventilation, things like that. Sometimes it was related to things like this. Technology was taken over, and he needed to install or to supervise the installation of the equipment for for instance, moving pictures. Here's one of the folders of reports on the town hall, and there were a lot of issues with the town hall over the years. I had a fantasy that we'd be able to read these letters, but I don't think they're really legible. They're really just examples. They're letters from Heath to usually to the council about aspects and elements of the requirements, usually health department requirements about aspects of the hall. Fire is often a fear. And this is substantial additions and changes that he supervised in, I think, the late 1920s. So the hall, this is the bit that I warned you about, where you kind of get into this kind of, on this conveyor belt of just things that happen that seemingly don't really lead anywhere. But I was interested to see that in the late 1930s, the Workers' Theatre Group wanted to put on for their debts one-act play, Till the Day I Die, which was an anti-Nazi play, apparently very, I haven't seen it. Sadly, if I was really doing my job properly, I would have found a way to see it, but I didn't, and neither did the Coburg Council, I suspect. And once again, no real explanation for why they didn't want an anti-Nazi play to be put on at their town hall in 1937. They rejected that out of hand. A few years later, sorry, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this gentleman's name, but he was a very highly regarded, famous, got his own Wikipedia page, Finnish conductor who is probably wisely touring the world basically while Finland is battling Russia, and in fact all right, I'm going to give it a go. Schneevoit?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The time that the part of Finland that Schneevoit was born in was actually ceded to Russia late in 1940. So he's in the country and appearing at Coburg Town Hall. Many, obviously, many examples of the hall playing a whole range of parts in people's lives, Coburg people's lives over time. If it's exhibits of kinds of wood, or if it's the debutantes' balls are obviously a huge thing at this time. The various art festivals. The most interesting thing to me about this, although it's perhaps not entirely clear, but from where we're looking at it here, but that is actually the town hall there, mirrored by this, I don't know what that's, an enormous meringue or something behind it, I'm not quite sure what that's about, but the use of the town hall as this really recognisable and, I'm going to say, iconic presence in Old Street there. Or debutantes. How many debutantes can be? Once again, not really obvious here, but that's the town hall again on the 1975 centenary publication. And I think that although Coburg has always embraced its town hall, never shied away from displaying it, there's obviously some degree of pride here. It doesn't really know what to say about it, but constant and frequent use over time. So back to Heath, if you don't mind, if you can indulge me for a few more minutes with a little more Heath, just to properly contextualise how this all fit together. Heath is a prominent, oddly enough, he's really a moorland architect in many ways. So he is actually very active in Brunswick and Coburg, and often up and down Sydney Road, Melville Road, a lot of small residential houses in Coburg as well. I lived in Coburg and was a bit of a fixture until he retired, essentially to Eltham quite late in life. Something that he designed shortly after, he was still working, I suppose, on the town hall, but he was also doing things like this at the Faulkner Cemetery, and it's odd to see. And this is one of those things that all you can really do is point and say why. There don't really seem to be any archways on the Coburg Town Hall. There is that one big curved element, and otherwise he doesn't seem to have gone for this kind of thing at all. But the archways are really prominent. I mentioned cremation was one of his passions, something that his son inherited, and the images of the cremation hall at Faulkner are something to witness. And the cremation building itself, which was demolished in 1980, and which was had been built in commissioned in 1925 and opened in 1927. So I know you did come here to hear about the cremation building at Faulkner. You might be familiar with this building, which is really just around the corner from the Coburg Town Hall, and is pretty much contemporaneous with it. It's the parish hall, which sits between two much older bluestone buildings there in Sydney Road. I noticed the heritage reports that are done for Coburg tend not to talk about Heath, tend not to have that kind of that attitude that there are interesting local architects that can be picked up and made something of in a local context. Maybe there should be more of that. I'd like to see more of that. This is Heath's last real major building, and it is so much not the major building that he originally envisaged, because if you know it, you'll know St Linus's. Absolutely none of that was built. Or let's be optimistic and say it is yet to be built, and that's actually what survives. What was ever created? What was ever done? This was, I think, interestingly. So I mentioned Heath's son Frank, who went on to be really prominent in the state and to a certain degree nationally. Was just finishing up his architecture degree at the University of London at this time, and apparently he did quite a bit of work on this with his father. So it's the moment where Charles passes the baton to his son. This is, so I'm finishing up here. Heath you've got to read between the lines of the Blythe Johnson book, and it's hard to be absolutely certain where Frank Heath sits in Blythe's affections. It's certainly the book is about Charles Heath, not Frank, not his son Frank. And Charles is, according to Blythe, really not served well by memorials like this. Frank designed this fountain to commemorate his father 4 years after Charles died, and it was, according to Blythe, so badly done that water used to blow over funeral processions, and there was a bit of wind in the cemetery. So it's this what Blythe calls a hodgepodge. Blythe says it does little on Heath, who sets such high standards of design at Faulkner in his 40 years as planner, architect, landscape architect, and manager. So I guess I will just say one more time that I've drawn a lot on the Heath's Hats book, and obviously newspaper material in the public records office as well, what I've talked about this evening. But I do think that Heath's Hats deserves some consideration as a publishable piece of work, because it's, and particularly because it's such a terrific Coburg story, really Coburg, a little bit north, a little bit south, but essentially it's, these architects who are little known, they're often, there's similar stories. There are people who are, best known as city engineers, and they work very locally. Obviously, Charles Heath went as far west as Geraldton, but essentially he's, whether you want to talk about his loyalties, I'm really not sure. He didn't seem to say whether he was loyal to the area or not, but it's where he did most of his work. And if he did any iconic building, I think it probably is the Coburg Town Hall, which, once again, he created. He really didn't seem to talk about it much. He certainly spent a lot of time working on it. He knew it inside out and back to front, and it's certainly part of his legacy. So I do believe that Heath's Hats book should be published, but I won't go on about it. I'm going to end there. So you've been very patient with the waiting for those images, and I appreciate that. Thanks very much to Mitch and to Roland.
Are there any questions? Yes.
Yes. No. Thank you. Very interesting. I did attend the lecture you gave in 2019.
Oh no! All right. So you're familiar with all of it.
Yeah, but
that I'm just a one-trick pony.
I'm just trying to recall. It was quite interesting as well, and there weren't as many people, so it was a little bit more interesting. But anyhow, you showed a number of buildings that you designed throughout the world. But my question is this: you showed one image of the town hall, seeing that we're focusing on the town hall, of course, and you mentioned he designed a chair.
Well, I think I just showed it. It was the mayoral. Was it the mayoral?
The mayor's chair, was it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. The question is this: did he actually involve himself with all the fitting out with furniture and all of the other accompaniments that go within an interior, like a lot of architects did do? Was it just the mayor's chair, or did he actually involve himself?
As I understand it, I mean, in my memory, and as I say, I've been through this material, and there's a lot of it. It's very, very detailed amount of material. I'm fairly certain that he was designing unique materials for the town hall. Right. I don't think that was normally his practice, but I think the town hall was really so there's churches, so there's a bit of detailed material for St. Lawrence's, for instance, where I think he and or possibly Frank were involved in designing interior elements of the building. Interior components, whatever they're called. But I think that this might have been the one time. Of course, we don't know about Geraldton, for instance. So we don't know about some of the work. There might have been some quite extravagant commissions that he had in some of the municipal buildings or otherwise that he did. This seems to be the one where he was definitely involving himself very heavily in quite an extensive range of elements for the interior of the building.
We actually have the chair.
The chair at the museum.
Yeah,
that chair.
We've got three chairs. There's an Art Nouveau one, which has the floral sort of pattern. Then there's, I think predating that, there's the Arts and Crafts chair. And I think that's the third one, sort of on the cusp of Art Deco, with the geometric shapes at the top. We've got three chairs along with the committee table.
So these are, I guess, you know, I really don't know how hard it is for architects to design furniture, you know, whether they need to do a special.
Was he also responsible for the relief, high relief of Diana and the hounds and such?
Well,
Because that's on the interior.
I mean, he's doing things like this, but I don't really, you know, that doesn't grab me. I mean, I think that might be, in a way, that might be kind of, you know, fill in the blanks. Someone more talented, fill in the blanks, please.
Yeah.
But you know, that said, he's, you know, as I mentioned, he's talking about. I can't go back that far, but he's talking about, you know, I designed a statue to put on top of the, you know, the archway to Sydney Road. So he might fancy himself as something of a
Sculpture.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he might have been in a position to design those things. There's some. I mean, it's really juvenilia, but there's material in the State Library where he's spending quite a bit of time designing ornate elements of buildings. You know, that's, you know, looks like he's. You know, it does look like very early work.
Yeah.
So he might be thinking along those lines. Yeah. I don't know how much of an all-rounder he was in that regard, because I haven't seen anything else of his that fits that pattern.
I have a question about Don.
Yeah.
Is there any why he chose Don? I mean, we had some other design. Is there any other indication why he?
That's a great question, and I have to say, honestly, I should shut up right now because I don't know the answer. But I mean, so this is from roughly the same time. So if he's, you know, if he's getting the latest magazines, he might be going, okay, well, this is what's.
So he never travelled abroad?
Apparently not. I don't believe he did.
When I first saw the Don years ago, it seemed to me almost Middle Eastern.
Yeah.
And I wondered if it had anything to do with whether it was some sort of referenceable to World War One. Yeah, Turkey, Constantinople.
David, the Short Foundation's done, or one of them, there are two, said that it's dedicated, the building is dedicated to World War One.
Right. Well, and then so there's this.
So we've got the cenotaph,
Yes.
but you've also got the stone saying that.
Yeah. Which was a really common thing for people to do town halls at that time.
It's just, for some reason, I know it doesn't quite look like
It's
ancient history. It just, the Constantinople just, and domes just.
I absolutely know what you mean, and I mean it's not impossible, given that it doesn't. You know, it seems from in his work it's unique to this. You know, that kind of structure is unique to this building. He doesn't seem to have done it anywhere else. He seems to have known what he wanted here, but once again, irritatingly from our point of view, there's no, you know, there must have been conversations. Why a dome, Charles? But he, you know, we don't know what he said.
Is there anything under the dome? Is there anything under the dome as far as room or
it looks to me like a secret little chamber there. I think someone should send up an investigation party to check it out. Yeah, I'm not really sure what that suggests, but it might just be a kind of a structural element, and the dome, I'm sure, is completely superfluous to, you know, to the actual.
Was there any commentary that you came across in the press, you know, like reviewing, you would say, oh, it's great, it's not great, or?
If there had been, I would have been the first. It would have been my lead.
Yeah,
You know, if that had come up, it doesn't seem to have been talked about much at all, sadly.
When I first saw it moving into the area in the 90s, I thought it was reminiscent of a bell and being on Bell Street.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's a great interpretation. That seems a little too witty and punning for a really expensive civic building, but I totally know what you mean. It does look like a bell.
I just, to add to all of that, you mentioned in your research that you've undertaken for quite some time, was there any, many architects and designers often write about their practice or passions or ideas or theories or references in, you know, the whole gamut. Did you uncover anything that gave us a little bit of insight into his thinking and subsequently his practice
Once again,
as an architect?
if they had been, I promise you I would have mentioned it by now. He really seemed to play his cards close to his chest for whatever reason, and you know, we have the, as I say, the testimony of the grandson who clearly had a lot of affection for him and was interested in his practice, but who had no real insights in that regard, except what he could glean from the actual work. So, no, he does not seem to. He will build a building, and sometimes he can obviously write. I mean, you know, obviously he was literate, but he can obviously write a decent sentence as well. And he would describe the things that he produced and give, you know, quite a decent account for himself. But he doesn't seem to have ever got into any sort of, you know, existential or otherwise sort of territory about, you know, why I'm an architect, or you know, what I want to do with my architecture, or even, you know, his ideas of, you know, what he could do for his community.
The publication of the book. Now, the City of Coburg did the Richard Broome history between two creeks in the late 80s, but I can't think of anything that the City of Moreland has done in terms of supporting an historical work. And it seems to me that like this historical society could approach the City of Moreland and perhaps also the Faulkner Cemetery trustees, given his role there, and suggest that they work on with the family on trying to get the work published as a you know, recognition corresponding with the centenary. And the other centenary thought I had when you did the picture of the interior of the town hall with the upstairs seating, which has been out of action for the past 35 years of that 100, there you go, of that 100 years, that ought to be something on the council's agenda as a fitting centenary memorial to the work as well.
So yeah, so we have, I think it's October, how many days was it? 31. So it was October 31, 1923, I think it was officially opened, the Gold Key and the entertaining orchestra. So that would be a great time to have some things like that. I'm going to suggest. I would, as I said before, I'd love to see the book published. I think that would be a great thing to happen. And I don't, but I also don't want to gazump the family if the family have a strong interest in that. Sorry?
Yes, if they've got a publication plan.
I don't know if they, yeah, and I really don't know if they do or not. It seems it's one of those things where they're excited that someone's really interested in the manuscript, but they also seem to be a little bit uncertain. I think possibly, you know, I can't remember when both died, but it wasn't that long ago, so maybe it was just a bit of a sensitive topic the last time I talked to them about it. But I think Blythe's widow, Josephine, is still with us, and a very, very lively individual. So I think I'd like to approach her again and see what her feelings are on it. So it would be a really nice book, not just because it's a great text. It needs a little bit, I feel, a little bit of editing, but not too much. I mean, he was a good writer. But there's, there's great images available as well. There's terrific stuff in the State Library that are just there for using, and be good to have that.
Did he also, Charles Heath for me, design the Coburg football overalls, I understand.
I have seen no evidence of that. I wouldn't say no, but I have seen no evidence. Do you know what the date is?
It was in the 1920s.
1920.
Yeah.
I mean, so that would be one of those things where you go, well, if they're talking about him as the city architect, the council's architect, they're referring to him in that way through the 1920s. And he has experience of that kind of work.
Yeah, it's like that.
It seems likely, but I have not seen any suggestion of that.
It's in the heritage review, study that was done.
Okay, all right.
So, yeah.
The public.
It would have gone back to the novel, 1999.
Right,
Yeah.
right, okay.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so, great question, quite possible.
And once down, have we got a fairly definitive list of the shops down Sydney Road? Were there any in Coburg?
No, so, no, I don't think we do have a definitive list. There was some, once again, it's Brunswick, there was some in Melbourne Road that were demolished quite recently, I remember. And there were some buildings that were, like a doctor's surgery with a residence attached that was, I believe, in Coburg, that's now a petrol station or something like that. So there were some, but once again, they're not particularly, and I think they're usually attractive and, attractive buildings, but there's never really been a sense of a continuity about this local architect. If that's important, which seems important to me, but I can understand why that might seem to be getting in the way of, the reality of heritage. Did you have a question?
Yeah, just a comment about town hall dances. They were a really big deal when I was a young bachelor in the late 50s, early 60s.
Okay.
I remember reading Town Hall advertised where romantic tunes turned to honeymoons. I never went there,
I put the same now.
but Heidelberg had huge dances, and so did St Kilda.
Yeah.
I was a teacher's college lecturer once, and the young women that I lectured to, they were around 19, 20, 21, they flocked to Heidelberg Town Hall to look for a husband, and also to St Kilda. It was a really big deal, with their dances there. And I think a lot of people met fiancés and future husbands and so on.
I mean, it's great you bring that up. I found in that the health, there's hundreds of pages in this file, and as you get towards the end of the 1950s, they start talking about rock and roll dances and so on at Coburg Town Hall. That was one of the things that I was sort of going, how far can I go with this? How long can I take this as a story? But certainly there's, in this, of course when I see something like that in this kind of context, I think, are they going to say, we will never have rock and roll dances again after what happened last time? But they don't say that at all. They seem totally fine with that as an idea. That's, if I remember rightly, that's 1958 they're talking there. But those kinds of things were clearly something that happened here and was such a big deal at town halls. As you say, in your experience.
I guess we really get going because we're going to have some supper. But I'd like to thank you so very much for coming. I'm so sorry about the technical glitches. It wasn't our fault.
Not blaming anybody. I know these things happen.
Yeah.
Happen to me all the time at work. That's why I'm so good at just carrying on.
Very good. Small gift to say thank you very much for coming.